The following is a presentation of Project Independence and WCWP. Project Independence is the Aging in Place initiative of the town of North Hempstead.
Welcome to Project Independence and You.
Good morning and welcome to Project Independence and You, Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org. I'm your host, Rebecca Miller, along with our co-host, Otto Lohse. Good morning, Otto.
Good morning, Rebecca. Nice day today.
Nice day. Definitely a lot better than it was last night.
Yeah.
Cleared up a bit.
Noisy last night.
Very, very, very. Also, of course, on the show is Kristina Liu. I think having a little technical difficulty, but she'll be back with us. She is our radio show producer and also the director of Senior Citizen Affairs for the Department of Services for the Aging, Project Independence, where I also work. We have a great show today. As always, our guest today is Ian Wilder, and Ian is the Executive Director of the Long Island Housing Services, Inc. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, you're very welcome. We're glad to have you. I mean, certainly housing is, for a lot of reasons, a lot of different reasons, a topic that's, super complicated here on Long Island. Of course, we're the Department of Services for the Aging. So, our main issue with housing is always, affordable housing for seniors, which is hard for anybody, let alone people who are on the super fixed income for, into their retirement. But before we get into that, I was reading through your bio, and I know that you are the executive director. Could you just give us a little bit of history and how you came to be the executive director for the Long Island Housing Services, Inc.?
Sure. I was actually an attorney in private practice for a dozen or so years, practicing real estate, which made sense. And I was doing a lot of social justice work outside, and I decided to switch careers. And I actually became a foreclosure prevention counselor here. And then over a number of years, moved through a bunch of different positions and ended up as executive director. I think I had 6 different titles. I joke that they ran out of titles, so they made me ED. I love my work. I am so thankful to be able to work here, be able to help people. I work with amazing people. I get to interact with people like you on this program, whose job it is to help people too. So
Right.
It's a great way to spend every day, even if it's raining like today.
It's nice out for us today where we are. But tell us a little bit about the Long Island Housing Services and what kind of organization it is.
Sure. We were founded in 1969 in response to the 68 passing of the Fair Housing Act. At our core, we are a civil rights organization focused on fair housing. So we are a full-service fair housing organization. We do education, we take complaints, we help people with reasonable accommodations and reasonable modifications. But we also do some housing counseling work. We help people in foreclosure, and we help tenants. We cover both counties, as our name implies. Even though we have a 631 number, the phone number is going to be for somewhere. Our office at the moment happens to be in Bohemia, but we're back and forth helping everyone.
Yeah. Funny you mentioned about the area code, because I think today they implemented the new Nassau County area code, but that number escapes me right now. So anyone on Long Island can contact you, contact for your services. I really want to get into more case by case what really people can do and what they can expect from you. But I'm sure things changed greatly also during COVID.
Yes.
The way that, with the extensions on people's rents and all that. So I'm really curious about how, the changes, and are we now returning to what it was before, or are there new rules or extensions implemented?
Yeah, it changed. I mean, we managed to, even when we shut down, never stop providing services. We provided services straight through, and we changed our model a bit, which actually I think has allowed us to serve more people. So it's really not in person that much, but in person really doesn't help people that much. It just takes up their time coming here. And especially if they are short on resources, it means that they have to spend their time and money that they can ill afford getting to our office.
Mm.
So we work with people, by phone, by fax when necessary, by email, and occasionally people come in, but not that often. Yeah, we've kind of moved out of the moratorium, but we are still in a lot of trouble.
Mm.
We're in a lot of trouble for both tenants and homeowners. There's a lot of problems. There's still a wave of foreclosures that we're looking at. Sorry, Long Island never completely recovered from the last mortgage crisis. Our numbers, even going into the pandemic, were higher than they were before the last mortgage crisis started. And with this, obviously, it just hit people hard. People not being able to work, people getting
Mhm.
sick, unfortunately, people passing away, the attendant medical costs of all that. So we have constantly been trying to connect people with resources in order to help them meet their housing goals as much as possible. I will say I greatly admire our housing counselors in terms of the resources they provide, in terms of making it easier, not just focusing on housing, but focusing on the total needs of people. Also, in terms of fair housing, that comes into play also a great deal. We did not hear a lot of COVID related complaints. There could have been, but we are still providing a lot of services. There's still a lot of fair housing issues. I would say, uh, you know, people who are seniors could fall into potentially any protected class, but I would say two of the largest ones that we deal with also affect the senior population, which is source of income. A landlord turning somebody down because they're not a W-2 employee. And that could be anything. That could be disability payments, VA payments.
Mhm.
They could say they don't like anything that's not a paycheck. That might even be that the timing of that check does not meet the first of the month when the landlord wants the payment, but the landlord could be paid monthly. Obviously, it also affects people who are very low income, like housing choice vouchers. It also affects people transitioning out of nursing homes. It affects people with traumatic brain injury. So there's a lot of possibilities. The other thing is disability, reasonable modifications and reasonable accommodations, which basically means that a place might have rules or they might have a physical plan that don't allow somebody to enjoy their housing the same as everybody else. But there's a reasonable change that can be made, and sometimes it's a change that should have been made, like a handicap parking spot or a ramp or something. Or it might just be their ability to park at a certain place or get to a certain place that is generally not allowed according to the rules, but really doesn't harm anybody. And it's just an exception. So there's a lot of services that we still provide that have impact your population that we're particularly talking to that have continued through COVID.
Wow. It's a broad problem, if you will.
How,
The more
yeah,
I
how's
prepared for this, the more I realize how little I really know about what really goes on within the housing world. Housing is like up there with the basics: food, water. Uh,
Yep.
you need a place to
Shelter.
sleep. Yeah, and there's a lot of people having a tough time out there, and it doesn't get a lot of
yes.
publicity, I don't think.
Oh,
Housing right now is getting publicity because of
yes.
Hochul's plan, uh, but beyond that, most of us really don't understand how many people are suffering. Uh,
There have been numbers that we are short like 125,000 housing units on Long Island. So, and if you're just out in the community And I'm not even talking about necessarily just doing my work. I I happen to live in Riverhead. I was at an anti-bias meeting because of my job. The meeting just, and this was before COVID, so it was a while back. The meeting just swerved to the need for affordable housing.
Right.
I think anybody who has young adults, especially, or family members who have restricted income, whether they're not earning a lot from a minimum wage job or they're on some type of pension or social security, they're feeling the pinch. Housing is insanely expensive on Long Island. We do not have great answers. People come to us, and I feel bad. Um, I've had trouble helping friends in my own community find housing within their needs. And what I'm thinking about ended up moving in with family members, which was not the best choice for them. They have 3 kids, but it's what they had to do at the moment because, I couldn't even use my personal contacts to find something for a friend. And I know people in housing in the area. So it's a really difficult problem. And as you said, Otto, we say it touches on all your choices because housing affects your transportation. It affects what food markets are available, what social connections you can make. Um, and probably for some of your audience who might be multi-generational households, it also affects a schooling. The quality of your school district depends on where you live. So, I realize it's what we do, but we believe that housing pretty much touches on all aspects. It also depends on what environmental hazards are near you. And, studies have shown what zip code you live in ultimately can affect the quality of your health. So you're absolutely right when you say how deep housing goes.
When the thing that gets me all the time is I'm now retired 20 years, so I'm in the fixed income category. Fortunately, I'm not starving to death, but I'm okay. But there's a lot of people who are not doing so good. But every time I turn around, like I live in New Hyde Park, and in Nassau County, they had a hunk of property over by the expressway and New Hyde Park Road, and they put in a Ritz-Carlton a $1 million to $3 million complex. Uh, all through Mineola, they put up big apartment buildings, all not affordable housing. So most of the stuff that's being built in Nassau County is not in the affordable category. Yet there must be people who can afford it. That's the problem. I don't know how you stop that. It's a business, and the realtors want to make money. That's what they do. They build places to make money.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a question of stopping that, and I don't want to get too deep because I know this is a town and they have their own policies, but I think it really is about opening up the opportunities on the bottom, opening up the opportunities better for affordable housing, and I think that's what the discussion is. There's been disagreements about how you do that, but I don't think, especially the way our economy works with the market economy and everything else, as much you tell people you can't build something, though, towns do have preferences. They do usually have to do approvals for things. But I think it's more finding ways to open up more opportunities for affordable housing to be built, especially because affordable housing, for instance, needs very complicated financing packages. So helping them put together the financing packages, making sure that they can get through the towns, that they have community support, that the community understands how great the need is for the people who are not personally touched by that need. So I really think it's about opening up opportunities. So I agree with you. We have had a great deal of housing built in certain places. I was just talking to somebody who's active in housing out east, and he said there's no problem with building lots of housing on the East End in most of the towns. The problem is a lot of it is luxury housing, and a lot of it's not even year-round housing. A lot of it's rental housing because people come out there to vacation, so it's empty part of the year. So it's not serving any of our needs. So it is, I think, really about opening up the affordable year-round housing for people and finding paths to make that easier to build. Because we have builders on Long Island who specialize in affordable housing, believe it or not. I learned this in that position. I never realized it. So if we open up more paths for them, they'll build more housing. Builders like to build. They never,
Mhm.
I've never heard a builder who go, "Oh, I have three projects. I don't want to do a fourth one." They would love to hire more people and build more housing. And the construction trades want to build. So I think it's about opening up pathways. So I think that's the answer. But I do agree with you. We are very good at building luxury. We're not as good at building affordable.
Right.
How, like you're more aware, obviously, than we are, or I am, anyhow. Uh, how do you organize the people that would advocate for affordable housing? Like, the more I look, the more, as I said earlier, the less I know. Uh, there's so many components to the puzzle, uh, and it seems like you almost need a few people that pull all these pieces together and come up with a good concentrated plan. Is there such a thing going on, or are we not
You know,
aware?
I literally came off a meeting that was working on that. There are groups in the nonprofit and foundation space, and literally they've been discussing policy among themselves, and literally that's what they're discussing is opening it up to public participation for people who want to see more affordable housing. And I think it's great that we're having a discussion right now. I'm really hopeful that, if people don't like one plan, that we have a bunch of different plans. The brilliant where democracy is brilliant is where we have what's called the marketplace of ideas, where it's that people bring forth a whole bunch of alternatives, the public gets a chance to discuss it and come together not only on what they want, but which ideas are going to work better. So I'm hoping we're going to get a whole bunch of ideas.
Okay, on that note, we do have to take a quick break. You're listening to Project Independence in You, Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org. We'll be right back with our guest, Ian Wilder, who is from the Long Island Housing Services, Inc. He is the executive director, and we'll be right back.
Take WCWP with you wherever you go with the WCWP app. Listen live 24/7 to all of our streams, all from one app. Plus, call the studios directly from the app and visit our social media. Download the app through the iOS App Store on Apple devices or the Google Play Store on Android by searching WCWP Radio, or visit WCWP.org for links. The WCWP app, available now on iOS and Android devices.
And welcome back to Project Independence in You, Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org. I'm Rebecca Miller, along with Otto Lohse and Kristina Liu, of course, Stan Cox as well. And we're speaking with Ian Wilder, who is the Executive Director for Long Island Housing Services. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure you are on the end of people calling. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people in crisis with all different things. A lot of the things, you had talked about, from fixed income to landlord issues, all that kind of thing. So, I mean, it's great that you guys are there and you can offer a lot of these services and advice and help people kind of manage their situation, because sometimes you can't change what's going on, but you can kind of help them manage with what they have and all that. So I'm curious how you do your education and outreach.
Sure. And that's a good segue. I have a friend, Ahmed Ali, who's a radio host on USB, and he always reminds me that I should put contact information out. So let me take a second to do that.
Absolutely.
Because we actually have under our resources page a lot of information. So our website is lifairhousing.org, LI as in Long Island, fairhousing.org. You can always email me, my first name, which is a lot of vowels, Ian, I-A-N, at lifairhousing.org, or you can always call us, 631-567-5111, 631-567-5111. And if people want, they can contact me directly. My extension is 314, and I will get you to the right person. Okay, outreach and education. It's a great question, because as you were saying it, I was realizing something I should have been mentioning. I feel like I'm on a talk show where I have something to promote, like I'm with Colbert or one of the Jimmys. We actually have a fair housing training coming up. If you go to our website, it's on that
Ah,
annoying pop-up right on the front. So it deals with a lot of these issues. So if you want to sign up, and it's Zoom like everything else in our world,
mm-hmm.
so you don't have to worry about going in person or getting sick or traveling somewhere. We have a resource page, and you had mentioned, I think, before we come on about people always in trouble. The phrase that I've come landed on to bring it all together is people always call us when they have some form of housing insecurity,
Yeah.
whether it's a landlord, a homeowner facing foreclosure, or somebody with a housing discrimination problem. They all have some type of housing insecurity. And to that end, we even added on the resource page a section on dealing with the stress of that, because it really is stressful. And sometimes it's hard to overcome the housing insecurity because of the emotional feelings. You know, I used to do foreclosure prevention, and we have clients that at times couldn't open their mail. And that was very damaging because we didn't know what the bank was saying to them because the bank wouldn't send it to us. So it's important to deal with all parts of it. Now, so we educate through our website. We work very hard to get earned media. You will see my name occasionally, and once in a while my face in media talking about stuff that we do. We also do the trainings, like I mentioned. So we have very active social media. We're on Facebook and Twitter. Both are at LI Fair Housing. And we're also on LinkedIn, but I don't know what the shortcut to the LinkedIn page is. So we try and get to people by various channels. Obviously, we're always talking to elected officials. If there are any elected officials listening right now, I always take calls immediately from constituent services to try and help people because they're a great channel. People often don't know where to go when they have a problem. So they're just like, I know this elected official, I'm going to call them. And it might
Yeah,
not even be
just
the
one
level. Yeah,
comment.
go ahead.
I was on your website and I got what I thought was a terrific trifold, which if people get that,
Yes,
it gives a great overview, I think, of your program. So how
thank you.
would people get that also would be,
Sure. It's at the top of the page. And I should say that all our major resources are in English and Spanish. Some are now in Chinese and Creole. We've been trying to expand to the major languages on Long Island. I will tell you that's a great. The trifold explains our services. This is actually one of my favorite ones. Let's see if I can do it as well as you do. Oh, word. Okay, how do I do this? Can I do it? No. Anyway, what it is it's a poster. I can't figure out the blur. And it's the equivalent of like when you go into the workplace, one of those labor posters that tell you every law. This one tells you federal, state, and county fair housing laws, because fair housing laws actually exist on three levels. So it explains it quickly and simply in one place. I will tell you, all of our stuff needs to be updated. The state has been very active in trying to protect people. The state just added protections for citizenship and immigration status. It's already illegal to threaten somebody with calling ICE if you're like a tenant and your landlord's mad at you. But now it's also a fair housing protection statewide. Another one that was added recently, domestic violence.
Mm.
Also for conviction. No, sorry, not conviction, for arrest, but not conviction. So there have been several that have been added by the state. The state's trying to make sure that people can get into housing because, as we were discussing in between, there are lots of barriers to people getting into housing. And honestly, the only thing that should matter is the rent going to be paid every month, not how you pay the rent or what you look like or anything else. Is the rent going to be paid? So we're trying to get people into places and get past barriers that shouldn't exist in the marketplace so people can get their housing. But thank you, Otto. Thank you for doing all that work to download it. I'm glad you found it useful and clear. Feedback like that is great for us. And I'll even take feedback with you could fix this or this part is this clear or I need a better explanation because we are constantly working on these because we constantly have to update them as things change on the state and county and federal level. we're constantly going in to update these anyway. So I'll take constructive criticism too.
Look, this
No,
isn't
I mean, I
constructive
thought it was,
criticism, but I just wanted you to know, Ian, too, that anyone who's listening live to the show and also people that eventually will watch any of the archive versions can call 311 or 516-869-6311 and just, speak with Kristina or myself, and we'll give all your contact info that you just gave out. So if you missed it,
Yes.
we'll have it. We're happy to, give it to anybody who requests it. And I'm sure that our nurses and social workers will also be using that information to connect with you for some of our residents if it's the right match for them.
Yeah. And you guys have been a really great partner, and I appreciate that, because it is hard for us to get to everyone.
Right.
And it's funny because often the media coverage is of our fair housing cases, but when we're in the media for fair housing cases, we get calls for the housing counseling services for the tenants and people in foreclosure. The housing counselors tell me that I know you were in the papers today because the calls increased, because people don't know where to go and they just see the word housing and they call because they just need help. And luckily, it happens to be something else we do. And I will always say, if it's not something we do, I will try and find somebody that does do it. So we try and give people help, and we appreciate all that you guys do.
it
Ian,
sounds a little like Project Independence, by the way.
yeah.
Yeah. You call Project Independence, they do some things, but maybe they don't do everything. So then they
Yes.
try to connect you with a partner to help fix whatever issue you might have.
Ian, foreclosure is such a scary word, has so much, negative connotation to it. And, bankruptcy, foreclosure, losing the house. What are the things that Long Island Housing Services can do for people that might find themselves in that situation? Like, how do they manage that? And how do you guys help guide them?
Okay. Sure. The one piece of advice I want to give, and it covers everything we do, is call us early.
Right.
And then I'll give a specific example, because I used to actually be a foreclosure prevention housing counselor. If you call before you're even behind, it's easier for us to figure out a budget and try and make some kind of deal, because the more money you owe, the harder it is to find a solution, because the more the bank has to try and deal with that huge hole of money that's owed. So the first thing I would say is call us early, or actually call there's a dozen housing counseling agencies on Long Island. They're all great. Call any of them, but call them early when you have a problem. Our foreclosure prevention housing counselors actually do a great deal. One of the strongest tools they have is they help people make a budget, because most of us, including me, don't sit down and do our monthly budget. We have a general idea that we're paying our bills or not, and how it's going this month, or whether we should skip expenses this week until the paycheck comes in. But we don't make a budget. And when I was doing the work, I was with a client, and she was actually an older client. She's a very talented woman. She was an artist. We made a budget, and we figured out that her shortfall was not that much. It was within a couple $100. And she's like, I could do that. I just need to do this, this, and this. A budget is a huge tool, and it's really helpful. Yes, most people can do their own budget, but it's really helpful to have someone sit down with you, because we also go through all your records, your bank statements and stuff. Because I had another client, and I'm looking at his bank statements, and I'm like, what's this payment? It looks like it's on every month, the Yamaha. He's like, that's my motorcycle. And I'm like, well, that's not on the budget. We need to account for that expense. So it's good to have somebody else, because it's not that he purposely didn't tell me, he just didn't think about it. And you don't necessarily think about all your expenses. It's good to have an outside person help you with it. The other thing is, mortgages, as far as I'm concerned, are unnecessarily complicated. When you go and take a mortgage out, you're probably not paying the person that you just spent 3 to 6 months getting a mortgage with. And I have a problem with this, because I think people lose their right to contract. That mortgage is immediately sold off. You have no say into who it goes. You can't choose who you're dealing with. But And you're actually dealing with two different parties because the party who sends you the bill, for instance, I get a bill from Wells Fargo every month. And you would think my mortgage is with Wells Fargo if you're not in this business. No, my mortgage is owned by Freddie Mac, but Freddie Mac hires Wells Fargo. So Wells Fargo is not really my bank. They're what's called the servicer. And it really depends on both who the investor is, which in my case is Freddie Mac, and your servicer, Wells Fargo, in terms of if you're in trouble, what plans are available, which I think is also unfair. There's no plan that's available for everybody. Two people could buy a house at the exact same time for the exact same amount of money, take out the exact same mortgage, live next door to each other, and they could have and they could be behind the same amount, if I didn't say that already. And they could have different options based on who their investor and their servicer is. So that's the other reason to talk to a housing counselor, because they spend all their time keeping up to date and talking to housing counselors, not only in our agency, but other agencies, about what's available. It's unnecessarily complicated, but you need somebody who's expertise. Here's the best part. Our housing counselors are paid by our grants. By law, they may not charge a fee. So they are already paid when you come to them. Their sole job is to help you, not to charge you money, not to make money off of you. They're already paid to help you. I don't like to use the word free because people assume that free has lesser value. So it's not free. It's already paid for, often by tax dollars or settlements with banks. But I'll be honest, in my world, housing counselors are more of an expert than anybody else because they have more resources available to them than anybody else. And now HUD just added another level. They have to be certified. They have to take a test, which is not an easy test, in order to keep that job. So I think that was a long answer to your question, but it's a little complicated. So I hope that helps.
You
Yeah,
used
no,
the
it
word,
did.
I'm sorry, expenses in there, and I think it's important to say that Long Island Housing Services there's no charge.
Yep, no charge.
Right, and people like you point out the word free, then they sometimes think it's why
Right,
is
no
that?
charge to you.
Yeah, what's going on behind the
Yeah,
scenes here?
yeah. We are experts that are paid for by grants and donations. And we've been in existence since 1969. We've been doing housing counseling and fair housing work for decades now. We work directly with HUD. We're a certified HUD housing counseling agency. We get HUD. We're a qualified fair housing organization that gets funded by HUD also. So us or somebody like us would be my choice if you're in this world to work with. And I'll tell you, when I get contacted by somebody, even a friend out of the area, I will find the housing counseling agencies in their area, including actually some family members, and text them because that's the best place to go for resources.
They sound very much like we had a high cap on, and they do the same thing for Medicare and the things around it. And it's the same story. It's supported by being paid by somebody, but the valuable information that they give is unbelievable. And obviously, that's where you fit in with the housing part of it. So that's good stuff.
Funny, Otto, I was thinking it's like what you guys are doing is similar to like someone who's like high cap with healthcare, because it's so many things change in the updates and the, universal health care versus private versus Obama. I mean, there's so many levels. When I was in the healthcare field for many years before I came to the town. And, I got help doctors get on, insurance panels and all that kind of stuff. I wouldn't know what is going on now behind the scenes in that way, because so much has changed and constantly changing. So it's funny you say that, because that's what I was thinking. Wow, it's similar, like the complexity. It's so unfair, especially as you get older. Things are getting more and more complicated. So, I like what you were saying, Ian, about call before you're in crisis. I wish, a lot of times that's unfortunately when people find out about us or, they're in crisis. People are not great planners for crisis times, And, what we're finding also with seniors is, I mean, Otto, you probably know, see, people are living a lot longer, a lot longer. We talk about this all the time. When I was a kid, no one's grandparents were in their 90s. Like, it was so unusual. And today it's common. Even hundreds. We have so many people in Project Independence members, and I know Kristina has all the great data on it, that are 90 and over. So, did they plan back in the day to live to 100? Did they include their housing possibilities or housing options? So, I'm curious if you're getting a lot of, if you're asking for a lot of assistance from the super senior population.
I actually don't know the numbers on super seniors. I'll tell you, for the trickle I see, it hasn't been particularly that age range, but I would have to go in and see it. I haven't seen a lot, and that also might mean that we're not reaching deep enough to them. I mean, that's often the problem. There are, unfortunately, as I say, I would love that we could go out of business, but it's not happening anytime soon. And there are so many populations with housing insecurity problems that we have trouble reaching out. So I haven't particularly seen large numbers. Maybe that's good news.
I think super seniors would get family people who would get involved.
Right. Well, we actually have to take a break, so we'll get back to that point. You're listening to Project Independence and You Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org, and we will be right back.
WCWP is your home for great music and great conversation. You'll find all that and more on WCWP.org. Listen live on the web, check out the lineup, subscribe to podcasts, and stay up to date on the latest station events. Get in touch with us and let us know if you like what you're hearing. And find out how you can support or get involved at the only community public radio station serving Nassau's North Shore. Plus, sign up to get a free bumper sticker. It's all online at WCWP.org.
And welcome back to Project Independence and You Community Talk Radio on 88.1 FM and WCWP.org. I'm Rebecca Miller, along with Otto Lohse, Kristina Liu, and Dan Cox. And our guest today, of course, is Ian Wilder, and Ian is the Executive Director of the Long Island Housing Services, Inc., and we're getting a lot of great information on all the services that you provide. And it's really important. And, I loved what you said before, is call them before the crisis. Call when you're, it may be just for information, to not have to call them again. I mean, ideally, like I think Ian, you even said it, you wish people didn't have to call, but they do. So over break, Otto found a quote I know that he wanted to share from the website.
Yeah, from one of your past directors, and I thought it seemed simple enough, but to me it's a worldwide problem. And that the quote is, "The healthiest society is one that is racially, culturally, and economically inclusive." Seems simple enough, but far from simple. There are so many things that make us not in that inclusive world.
Powerful.
And the quote's from Michelle Sant'Antonio. She's my immediate predecessor. She's also a very good friend. I actually knew Michelle before I was even working here, from the social justice world. She's actually retired from here, though it took a while for her to completely break away because she's so dedicated. But now she's spending a lot of her time doing other social justice work on Long Island. And the quote so speaks to our work that, as far as I'm concerned, it'll always be in our literature. Thank you for bringing it up, Otto. And I think I can go into, a couple of things. Michelle would want me to remind everybody that our website is lifairhousing.org, and our phone number is 631-567-5111. And I would also mention that we could always use people, everyone, including the vast majority of your audience, which I assume is seniors, as fair housing testers. If people are interested in doing civil rights work, it's fascinating work. we both need people and people fall into any number of protected classes. I mean, if you're watching me on video, you think, oh, but he's not a protected class because he looks like a white male. Well, race is a protected class. Being white is a protected class. Someone can't discriminate against it. Gender is a protected class. They can't discriminate because I'm male. I'm also a parent. I'm also married. I'm also Jewish. All those are protected classes. Besides which, when we do fair housing testing, when we're checking whether someone's discriminating, similar to what Newsday did in the Long Island Divided, we often have a comparison tester, somebody outside of that. So we need a good pool of testers. You can always go to our website, contact me, say you're interested in it. The training is fascinating. People do the work. When I talk to them, they say they love doing the work. They feel like they're actually doing something. Because in this world, it's so hard to feel, a lot of us do quick activism. I'm guilty of it too. And we click and we send the letter out on the website. But sometimes that feels a little empty, like we're not doing something in the real world. Our testers love the work they do because they feel like they're doing it in the real world, that they can actually are affecting something. And you know what? We're happy when it comes back and people aren't discriminating. That's what we actually want. So that's another way that people can get involved to move towards that world that Otto saying we would all like.
Well,
So,
discrimination, I think a lot of times we do connect it to the fact that Black people do get discriminated against. But in addition to that, there are lots of other categories of people who get discriminated against. And maybe it might be worth just mentioning a couple of good examples of people who do get
sure.
discriminated against.
Well, one complaint I just saw said was advertising. It was an agent advertising housing, a number of different sets of housing, and it just said single occupancy, which is familiar discrimination. You can't just say that. Yes, the towns do have requirements for per square feet, but that's not what this is about. And people have a legal right under the law to have other people living with them. So people will discriminate. Sometimes they'll go as far as saying no children, which, unless it's particularly under the law, like some 55 or older, where they're allowed to do it legally, they're not. Other discrimination we see that I mentioned often that we see a lot, even though Nassau and Suffolk County has had their own source of income laws for decades, is discrimination based on income, where if people don't have W-2 income, a landlord says, no, I'm not interested in that. And there are various voucher programs, there's disability income, there's veterans, there's all kinds of other income. So that's another one we see. There's actually a huge, long list between what's on the federal, state, and local. As I mentioned, Otto mentioned our website under our resources. There's a poster that lists it all. And what I would say to people is, if you think you're being discriminated against, you don't have to make the determination whether you're in a community that's protected, and you don't have to make the determination that there's enough evidence. Call us. We will talk to you. If we think it's something that can go forward, we will investigate. We will possibly test, if possible. And if it's not something, we'll give you resources for HUD and New York State and your county, where if we don't think there's enough evidence, but you want to go forward, you can put in the complaint yourself. If we can help you, we will. So I would say if people think something's not right, they should contact us. And there's overlap, because a lot of the times it's a lot of calls we get are from tenants. And sometimes it's something that's discriminatory. I mean, we had a call recently where the person was saying it was sexual harassment, which unfortunately is way too common and has not been dealt with enough. I will say the last presidential administration, Ben Carson, did focus on that because his mother was sexually harassed in public housing. So it was near and dear to his heart. But there's a lot more of it, I think, that we get to. But I would say reach out to us. We'll have a discussion with you. Even if sometimes people in certain communities just have a feeling that you're being treated differently, but you can't tell. like you're feeling you're just being pushed away when there's something really there, that's where our testing comes in. If we talk to you and we feel that there's something there, then we could send in different people and we can see if they're treated differently. Because discrimination, if you saw the news say thing, is not always clear. If it's difference in treatment, you don't know you're being treated differently than somebody who's demographically different than you. There's no way for you to know that. But sometimes people in the pit of their stomach, whether it's because they're a senior or they're certain race or ethnicity or their gender or they're a single parent, they feel they're being treated differently, but they can't quite put their finger on it. And sometimes they're right. Call us and we'll talk to you.
One of the suggestions on your website, along with that, was to have written documentation, if possible,
Yes.
as early as you can.
Yes.
Remind yourself of dates and
Yeah,
incidents.
write stuff down. Write stuff down, and that's true. That's true actually across the board. That's not only true for the fair housing. That's true if you're dealing with your landlord and you feel doing stuff wrong. Write it down. Keep records. Especially true with banks. When you talk to the banks and you're having problem foreclosure, you should call us early. But anytime you talk to them, anytime you call them, or they call you, get the person's name. Write down what happened on the call, because we could go back and say, you know what, this person said this on this date. That's what we're expecting. So writing it down is always good. That's great advice. Otto, you're great at this.
I read good. It was all on your website.
He probably knows a lot about you too. So he researches everything and everyone. So something shocking may come up. But we talked a little bit over break about tenants and tenant rights. And, I'm sure there's a difference in the way people actually, I want to say, feel when you're a homeowner and you have issues and you're running into financial problems and, possible bankruptcy. And when you rent, it's almost like you feel like you have less rights because you're renting, whether you're renting in an apartment or you're subleasing or whatever the situation is. So what's the truth behind that, being a tenant and a rent, maybe not versus owning, but, the rights for people that are renting?
You're right. There is that feeling. New York, by the way, set up a really good process for foreclosure. The banks actually, if they bring you to court, they actually have to sit down with you face to face. They have to have their attorney there. They have to sit in front of an administrative law judge, and they have to show that they're trying to work out a deal before the case can go forward. Not something that's unaffordable for them, but they have to show they're being reasonable, that there could be something that can be done. And that process is slow, but the thing is, the bank can't do anything to your house until you actually get to the end of the foreclosure process, which can take years. With a tenant, even though you have what's called possession, it's still somebody else owns the property, and you feel like they have control over it. At times, we've seen this a lot. They will illegally try and turn off utilities, and I mean it's illegal. New York State made it a misdemeanor, a crime, to illegally evict somebody, and that includes turning off the utilities. And you have the right to call the police. And I will say we've talked to the top echelons of the police, and they're very aware it's a misdemeanor. But sometimes the police on the beat may not be completely aware. So if you're having difficulty, give us a call, because they can't push you out. The only way a landlord can get you out is to take you to court, and the sheriff has to put you out. So it's a process. It's a legal process. Your landlord can't harass you. They can't change the locks. They can't put your stuff out. And it's very important that you understand what rights you have. And you have rights as a tenant. By the way, a tenant is somebody who's legally entered the property and stayed there for 30 days, which is why a hotel won't rent to you for 30 days, because they don't want you to get tenants' rights. That's why when people want to stay long-term at a short-term stay, they'll want you to move out after a certain amount of time, because they don't want to deal with it. So you don't have to still be paying rent or have been paying rent. So like we said before, every area has its particular rules, and we have people who just focus on that. We have 2 counselors, both of them have resources, have deep knowledge. One of them actually happens to be a native Spanish speaker. They're both amazing and compassionate, and they're great in terms of tenants. I will say all people are compassionate and they go the mile, but we have people who specialize just in that area. So they do it every day. They know what the changes are. They know what your rights are. So it's good to call us because the rights also change. For instance, and you talk about not knowing about it. I've been out of doing tenant counseling and I've been out of doing foreclosure. When people call, I'm tempted to try and give people answers. I'll give them general answers, but I'll send them over the housing counselor because I can't keep up with
Mm.
the laws. For instance, how much notice your landlord has to give you depends on how much time you've been renting. And I don't remember, like, if you're there for 3 years, do they have to give you 60 days? I can't keep up on that, but we have people who do it every day who can. So that's why it's good to call us, even if you have a question, if you're not sure. Um, and we'll point you in the right direction. And it's better to be empowered and know what your rights are so you can speak to your rights and defend yourself, and also know what your rights are not. And, this is wintertime. You have rights under New York State for the heat to be at a certain level during the day and a certain level during the night. The Attorney General does have a landlord tenant guidebook. It's in there. Their guidebook, you have to read a little carefully because New York City has different rules than the rest of the state, which I
Mhm.
don't think surprises anybody. So you have to be able to know how to read it. But call us if you have questions. You don't have to go to that guidebook. We could give you answers in terms of, because that's a problem people have in the winter. Their place is too cold.
What
Right.
you provide housing support for most issues, like almost all issues. One of the things that I did read is that you do not provide placement or searching for housing. That's not what you're there for.
Yeah, we don't, you're absolutely right. We don't have actual housing and we don't have placement. In fact, placement would be a problem because of the various work we do, because we do fair housing work. We can't have direct relationships with certain landlords and not other landlords, because that would look like we're favoring certain people and maybe not checking that they're doing the fair housing work. We can't even have the appearance of impropriety. So yes, we have to keep a certain distance. So we don't have actual housing. We could our counselors could talk to you, maybe give you suggestions about how to do the housing search, maybe some places that you're not going, maybe some other nonprofits. Like if you're really in an emergency situation, you might want to call Long Island Coalition for the Housing, who is a great partner of ours. Or you might want to, if you're looking for affordable housing, you might want to get on the list of some of the nonprofits that build affordable housing on Long Island. So they can give you suggestions to help with the housing search, but yeah, we can't place them and we don't actually have housing. That's the problem with our name. Someday I want to get a clearer name because it does sound like we actually provide housing as a service. That's
Right.
the one thing we don't do.
Right. But so much of the things that you do is so important. And, kind of like Otto was saying too, because he always says everything right. In a lot of the ways you guys work like we work, like Project Independence, and, getting the word out about what we do and kind of understanding what we do, is so important. And I think we were talking about this last week at a staff meeting that most people hear about Project Independence, even though we send out newsletters to every household that has someone 60 and older, and we do advisory meetings. But most people learn about from a survey that we do from friends. So it's people telling people about it. So for people listening, you may not be in this situation, but you may know someone who is in a situation, and maybe you can tell them about Long Island Housing Services. I mean, I'm thinking in my head, I actually know someone I'm definitely going to recommend because it's coming, it's coming, and you don't want that to happen. So it's really better planning. We always talk about that too, project and planning. Who plans? Hopefully we start to plan a little bit better, with all these kinds of programs.
I was in sales pretty much all my business life, and we had a phrase, and that is that we wanted smart feet on the street. Basically, in both cases, project independence, housing services, the smarter the people are, and the more they talk to other people, the better. You know, for the betterment of the people themselves.
And,
You're not selling anything; you're providing a service.
and to be blunter, I have a coworker who's a Marine Corps family, and she quotes something they say, which is, "If you fail to plan, you plan to fail."
That's a very good way to come to our next break. And before we do, Ian, we want to thank you so much for joining us, such important information. Anybody listening can definitely give us a call at 311 or 516-869-6311, and we'll make sure that you have all the right contact information to get in touch with Long Island Housing Services. And again, thank you so much for spending this hour with us.